Hey, a couple of weeks ago, both my car and my wife's car were in some serious and overdue need of some maintenance. And basically just deflated tires and oil changes, okay? So I got my wife's car taken care of first, and then a couple of days later, I moved on to mine. Hers went very smooth. Mine, not so much. So let me just show you a picture that captures how well this project went for me. Take a look at this, okay? If you aren't really a car person, or man, even if you are, because it's not really obvious from the picture, that is my oil filter, okay? Or maybe what was left of it by the time I finally got it off of my Camry. It just didn't want to come off. Now, I don't know how you're wired, all right? I don't know how you're wired, but here's how I approach projects, or how I react to them when they kind of go that way. It just doesn't take much for me to go from a 3 to like an 11. All right, it doesn't take me long, and then I calm back down a little bit and keep trying. But I think I worked on that thing for like maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It should have been 5 minutes, and it took me maybe 45 or 55 or even 60. And of course, it was late when I started doing it. Now it was really late, and the next day, get this, the next day we were supposed to take that car down to the Cedar Rapids airport and catch a flight. All right. So all of this in the moment, it starts to pile up right on me in my mind. There was this moment where, like, I almost in my garage, I almost got to the end of my rope. Okay, what happens if I can't get this stupid filter off? What happens? It's too late to call anyone. I don't have time tomorrow. Hadn't even packed yet, of course. Right now. You already know because you've seen the picture. I obviously was able to get that thing off. It did involve me taking pieces of my wheel well out to get to it, but nevertheless, here's my point. All right, the gap between something's wrong and everything's wrong. The gap between something's wrong and everything's wrong. Sometimes that gap feels pretty small. It just does. Now it was just a stuck oil filter. That's all it was, really. That's the only thing that was wrong. This oil filter was stuck. But in my mind, it started to get feel like a lot more than that. It was a missed flight, or it was poor planning, or it's kind of an embarrassing inadequacy. And in just a few minutes, for me anyways, it went from something's wrong to like everything's wrong. It's kind of crazy how that happens, I think. So, here we sit. My friends, here we sit one day after Christmas. There's no way for me to know how Christmas went for you. There's no way for you to know how it went for me. But I think what we all know is this. The holiday time is a time. Holiday time is a time where many of us, for a lot of us, the gap between something's wrong and everything's wrong, that gap at holidays feels pretty small. It just does. So kids, okay, if you're in the room with us here today, kids, maybe you asked for something, and you asked, and you made it very, very clear what you wanted, and maybe you got a lot of cool stuff, but you didn't get that thing, right? And maybe you got a lot of other things, but you just didn't get the thing that you wanted. One thing went wrong for you, and it kind of feels like everything went wrong, doesn't it? So some of us were looking forward to maybe some much needed time off, and then life happened in some way, shape, or form, and we didn't get it. And it didn't feel like it was too much to expect. Just have a day or two where you needed to not solve any problems or to not fix something or address something, but apparently that wasn't in the cards for you. And the one thing that couldn't go wrong went wrong. And now the window for some rest is gone. One thing went wrong. It feels like everything went wrong. Just even in my world, okay. A couple of weeks ago, I did a funeral for one of our guys here at Prairie Lakes, and he passed away from cancer. He got the diagnosis a month before he was supposed to retire. That's a pretty big thing to go wrong, and. It's not hard to see how something like that when that goes wrong, for it to feel like everything's wrong. So here's what I want to do. I want us to take a look at Psalm 116, okay? The psalmist writes about this very thing that we've been talking about. So this is from Psalm 116. Take a look at this along with me. The psalmist says, I love the Lord, for he heard my voice and he heard my cry for mercy. Because he turned his ear to me, I will call on him as long as I live. The cords of death entangled me, the anguish of the grave came over me, and I was overcome by distress and sorrow. But then I called in the name of the Lord. Lord, save me. The Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. The Lord protects the unwary. When I was brought low, he saved me. Here's what I think. I think we often make the mistake of reading Scripture through kind of rose-colored glasses. What I mean by that is we have a tendency, I think, to filter out some of the tough stuff that's right there in Scripture. And just we want to get to the encouraging stuff. But if you take those glasses off with me just for a second, you look at this psalm, what do you see? What do you see? Well, the author's crying out for mercy. Cords of death entangled him. The anguish of the grave, overcome by distress and sorrow, unwary, didn't expect it, didn't expect that. He was brought low. I mean, we don't know exactly what the psalmist was walking through, but it was pretty bad. It was pretty serious. And so he calls out, to God, have mercy on me, God. Save me, help me. I'm walking through something here. I mean, I don't know that I can make it. I don't know that I can bear it. I don't know that I can get through it. Take a look at what the psalmist says next. Okay, this is in verse 7. He says, return to rest, my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. Which is kind of surprising, I think, given what we've heard so far, right? I think that's true. The Lord's good. He's been good to us. But that truth can feel pretty slippery, especially when something or even everything feels like it's going wrong. The Lord's been good to you, and you can rest in that. Yeah, but man, during those times, those kinds of times, that the truth feels about as slippery as that oil filter, okay? In fact, and the psalmist actually says as much in the next few verses 10 and 11. Here's what he says. He says, I trusted the Lord when I said, I'm greatly afflicted. And in my alarm, I said, everyone else is a liar. Okay? So the psalmist entrusts, he gives over his affliction or whatever is painful, he gives that up to God as an act of trust. But everyone else around him apparently had a lot less faith in God's ability to do anything or actually be able to do anything about it, to the point where the psalmist kind of has to make a decision. Either what everyone else is saying about my situation is right, everything that they're saying, either that's right, or what my faith in God says about it is right. It's one or the other. It can't be both. And so he makes this decision. I mean, right in the middle of his affliction, he says, God is the only one who can really help me. Everybody else, anybody else who says differently, they're liars. Now, that kind of faith, that kind of decision might feel out of reach for some of us, I think. Like that approach or whatever, that's reserved for only like the best of us or the most experienced or the most mature or whatever. But the psalmist does give us some really great practical advice for the rest of us who feel like we're just stumbling through some stuff, who feel like the gap between something's wrong and everything's wrong is really small. Here's his practical advice. Verse 12, here's what he says. He says, what shall I return to the Lord for all of his goodness to me? I will lift up the cup of salvation and call on the name of the Lord. I'll fulfill my vows to the Lord in the presence of all his people. I'll sacrifice a thank offering to you and call on the name of the Lord. Okay, so here's what I want you to leave you with in this little portion of our time together here today. Here it is. Taking the time to tell God thanks. Taking the time to tell him thank you for everything he's done. It's going to help you to see everything differently. Taking the time just to say thanks for everything God's done. Making a list, simple as that. And just saying thank you for. That practice can really help you see everything else a lot differently. Now, I don't know what you're walking through right now. I don't know if it's just one thing or if it's everything, but I just want to encourage you to do this one very simple thing, okay? In the midst of all of it, stop and take some time to tell God, thanks for all those other presents that you gave me. Thanks for all those other good things that you've done. Thanks for all the things that I have a tendency to minimize in seasons like this. Put the filter wrench, the oil filter wrench down just for a second, and take your focus off that one thing just for a second, and take some time to tell God thanks for everything that he's done. Gratitude will change your perspective.